to make this quick video on, again, what I did with the Mini, just theorizing a bit based off of some leaks and based off of the history of the iPad Pro as to what the 2021 iPad Pro could look like. I wasn't excited for this iPad Pro the same way that I was about the Mini, but I was still excited to see what Apple would put out because the previous update to the iPad Pro was literally the most minor update to an iPad Pro in the history of iPad Pro. But before we get into it, please do leave a like and subscribe. I am on a weekly upload schedule, or at least I'm trying to, so you will be getting hopefully a new video every week from me, as of now at least. But yeah, let's just get right into the video. So up until now, the iPad Pro has really just been following a 1 to 1.5 year update schedule. So seeing a new one come out in March, which is just 1 year after the previous update, isn't entirely impossible. But then again, the update that we got in 2020 was the most minor update. So with that out of the way, I think that we are going to be getting a new iPad Pro in March. Also because the iPad Air is so similar to the 2020 iPad Pro that literally, unless you can really make use of the couple of extra features that the 2020 iPad Pro has, there's really no reason to go for it rather than the Air. So Apple do have to really update the iPad Pro this year to be significantly better than the iPad Air, not just like a better screen. So speaking of the iPad Pro being in a weird spot right now, we've been hearing, or rather not hearing, about the iPad Pro 11-inch getting another update this March. And basically what I'm trying to say is that the 11-inch Pro might be killed off. Now, I don't think that's gonna happen. Yes, the 11-inch Pro is a horrible deal right now because the iPad Air is practically identical to it, and really the only noticeable difference to most people would just be the ProMotion display. But despite that, I do think that there is still a huge market for the iPad Pro 11-inch, because especially with the stuff that we've been hearing about the CPU upgrades, like basically an M1 equivalent that is an A series chip that will be in the next iPad Pro, there are going to be people who will get the iPad Pro 11-inch with that A14X or whatever because it'll be a lot more powerful than the Air, and the Air isn't powerful enough for them. So yeah, let's talk about the A14X, or whatever it's going to be called. Basically, this chip is supposed to be just as good or close enough to the M1 in terms of performance. And the thing is, right now with the iPad Air and the iPad Pro, the chips are too close in terms of performance to upsell people to the iPad Pro. Because the A12Z is just, I think, 10% faster in terms of multi-core, and actually a bit worse in both single-core and metal scores. Again, these are just benchmarks, but they do provide a bit of a view as to how powerful these devices are. Now, another thing that we've been hearing about is a mini LED display, which is quite a welcome addition because right now all iPads use LCD displays. And that's actually part of the reason that the iPad Pros have 120 Hz. So for those of you that don't know, a mini LED display basically combines the color accuracy and the blacks and the contrast ratios of OLED into the reliability of LCD. So it does use a backlight, which does prevent burn-in and stuff, but then again, the backlight is part of the reason why it's actually a bit worse than OLED, but it's close enough. Something that I know a lot of people want is the front-facing camera on the iPad Pros to shift to landscape mode. Personally, I don't really have a problem with it, but for a lot of people who do use iPads for things like business meetings and school meets, especially with everything being virtual nowadays, it's a lot more convenient to have it in landscape. Also because when it's in portrait, now it's on the side, so if you're looking at the screen and the camera's over here, it almost looks like you're looking somewhere else and you're not paying attention. It's just overall weird. But with it in landscape, it's just a lot more convenient because it emulates the laptop experience, and many people would like that as well. Now, we actually did see a patent about this, I think last May, which is quite a long time, I mean 10 months. A lot of patents that Apple files just don't always come to fruition, but hopefully this one does and we actually do see it happen. On to another thing that a lot of you guys want as well, and that is Pro apps coming to iPad. So we've been hearing a lot about Pro apps like Final Cut, Logic, this sort of stuff coming to iPad for a long time, and especially with a new leak of Final Cut possibly getting a subscription-based model, that might actually happen. Now, this is probably one of the main bottlenecks of the iPad Pro since it's got all this power, not being able to take full advantage of it like with Pro apps and stuff. So it's really nice that this is all coming. Personally, I don't mind too much because I don't think I would buy Final Cut Pro at the moment anyways on iPad, but for a lot of you guys out there, I know that a lot of people, lots of professionals even, just really want to get apps like Final Cut Pro to come onto their iPad just because of the insane versatility and portability of an iPad. I really hope that this doesn't just turn out to be an iPad Pro feature, because I am aware that the base iPad probably can't run it very well with 3 gigs of RAM, but I'm hoping that, 4 gigs is the base to be supported, because then the 2018 iPad Pros will also be included in that. My iPad Air would be included, even though I don't have plans to get it right now. Maybe someday in the future I probably will. But yeah, I think that 4 gigs is probably enough because of how well optimized iPadOS is. And a feature that I'm pretty sure doesn't really matter for most people right now is 5G. So I think that it's pretty much confirmed that we'll see 5G coming to iPad. So as of right now, 5G isn't very well spread out anywhere aside from the US, and even in the US, it's not like every single place is covered, but certain cities do have pretty robust and pretty consistent 5G. Personally, here in Canada, we do get okay 5G. I mean, around Toronto, you do get a good 5G signal most of the time. While this doesn't really matter right now, I think that somewhere down the line it might actually matter because of Apple's iPad's longevity. I mean, the iPad Air is on its 7th year of software support right now, which is crazy. So these iPads are probably going to last a very long time. And even if you pick this up, 2-3 years in the future when 5G actually becomes much more widespread, then you're going to have the advantage of having 5G, even though it's a 2 or 3 year old device. And finally, we might also be seeing a new Magic Keyboard for the 2021 iPad Pros. So when I first saw this, I thought that kind of makes sense, because obviously with the iPad Pro scheduled to get a bit of a body upgrade, a bit thicker and a bit heavier, especially because it's getting mini LED, then yeah, maybe the current Magic Keyboard can't support it properly or anything like that. But I know that a lot of people would be disappointed about this because they want to upgrade their iPad Pros, but they don't want to upgrade their ridiculously expensive Magic Keyboards, and this thing might be even pricier. But it has some good news. So actually there have been a couple conflicting leaks. So there was one from a leaker called Comia Leaks. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But essentially they leaked this back in August of 2020, saying that there would be a new Magic Keyboard coming, and that was really just it. And apparently it would also be compatible with the 4th gen iPad Pros and the 4th gen iPad Air. And actually John Prosser mentioned that we would be getting a new Magic Keyboard alongside the iPad Pro and AirTags, which, I mean, seriously, that's been leaked since like 2018. Now there was a new patent about the new Magic Keyboard that we might be getting an Apple Pencil slot in the hinge. This sounds really cool and I totally want to see it, because right now with the Apple Pencil, well, it's still magnetically attaching to the side, it's just, the magnets aren't really that strong, and I've got first-hand experience with that with my iPad, and I don't really want it to fall off or to get scratched or something like that while it's in a carry bag. Having it in the hinge makes a lot of sense for people who do want to protect their $130 accessory. I know I certainly would. But I just do hope that it doesn't replace that pass-through USB-C port, because that would be a real bummer. Speaking of USB-C ports, I hope that we might actually get a couple more USB-C ports with the iPad Pros. Because one of the main reasons that people still go for Surface Pros and stuff is just because of the I/O. And having more USB-C ports makes sense when you're paying $800+ on a tablet. There are a couple problems with this. So first off, you got speakers. And if you do want to have 2 on the same side, for example, you want them to be somewhat spaced out so that you can actually plug in multiple accessories that might have thicker cables and whatnot. But if you want to put it on different sides, there's another problem, and that is mics. So the iPad Pro has 2 mics over here. This is an iPad Air, but I'm just talking about the iPad Pro in general. But the iPad Pro has 2 mics right over here, and it's also got 1 mic right over there. And I do think that if we do get a USB-C port on this side, for example, because the mics are pretty close together on this side, I think that we might see them get spaced out around the USB-C port. I don't know how it works internally, but that's just from an outside design perspective. And Apple also has a thing with symmetry. They always like to keep things very symmetric and uniform, so this can't really break that. I do have one small personal wish, and that is for a Taptic engine to come to the iPad. Because the iPhone's haptic engine is so good, sometimes when I'm just like, playing games on my iPad, I start to miss the haptic feedback that I get from the phone, and it just feels a lot less immersive. Yeah, you got a big screen, yeah, you got 4 speakers and stuff, but Taptic engines would be really cool. I am aware that there are a couple problems with this. First of all, the space. Because of the iPad's sheer size, it would be hard to get a Taptic engine that would provide effective haptic feedback all around the iPad, because that would also take up a lot of space. And the thing about the iPhones is that they've got a ginormous haptic engine. The insides of iPhones are packed. But when it comes to the iPad, the reason that some chips in the iPad are better than the iPhone, despite having the same name, like the A12, the A14, because you've got so much more room for thermal management. And I don't know if that's really worth sacrificing for a Taptic engine. Because if we do get a Taptic engine, it's not going to be one huge square or rectangle smack in the middle of the iPad. It's probably going to have a couple different ones, like maybe 4 or so, close to the edges of the iPad. That would still have to be quite big for effective haptic feedback. But yeah, this is just one small personal wish. I don't think it's going to happen, but if Apple could pull it off, that would be nice. But yeah, if you're still here, props to you. Thanks so much for watching up until this point of the video. If you did enjoy the video, feel free to drop a like and subscribe, and check out a couple of my other videos as well. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and that's it for me.